The People of North Korea, a Vilified Nation, and What is the Truth? By Eva Bartlett from September 2017 from the In Gaza website. From August 24th to the 31st, I visited the DPRK, North Korea, as part of a very small delegation interested in hearing from North Koreans themselves about their lives, the U.S. sanctions and incessant war maneuvers, their history, and more. A sample of photos and videos with more to follow soon. Please bear in mind that this country is among the most vilified on earth, along with Syria and formerly now destroyed Libya. Western media does not speak of North Korea's people, nor of the amazing infrastructure, the free housing and medical care, or the impressive agriculture and green energy. And the many things of the people of the DPRK have done so well in, which I'll elaborate more on the coming days. Pyongyang and much of North Korea was leveled in the 50s by U.S. bombings, with reportedly just one or two low-level buildings standing. After destroying and murdering in the DPRK, America slapped sanctions on the country. How the people have continued and made huge advances is worthy of respect. The absurdly cartoonish news one hears in Western media about North Korea is meant to detract from America's crimes against the Korean people, and to garner support for yet another American-led slaughter of innocent people. One high school student commented something to the effect, "Why doesn't anyone put sanctions on America?" Too true. I'll be adding more photos to this album as internet and time allow, with hopes of offering a starkly different view than the corporate media rendition of North Korea. A few good resources on North Korea and the U.S. aggressions. One would be Michael Chasudowski's overview, including citing Western media sources acknowledging the U.S. destruction of North Korea. According to Dean Rusk, who later became Secretary of State, the U.S. bombed everything that moved in North Korea, every brick standing on top of another. End quote. It is now believed that the population of north of the imposed 38th parallel lost nearly a third of its population of 8 to 9 million people during the 37-month-long hot war in 1950 to 1953. Perhaps an unprecedented percentage of mortality suffered by one nation due to the belligerence of another. That's from Brian Willison, on the Korea and the Axis of Evil from Global Research, April 2002. Even Newsweek tacitly acknowledges that the U.S. committed extensive war crimes against the Korean people. Quote, according to 2009 study, the Asia Pacific Journal, in a 1984 interview, Air Force General Curtis LeMay, head of the Strategic Air Command during the Korean War, claimed U.S. bombs, quote, killed off 20% of the population, unquote, and targeted everything that moved in North Korea, unquote. These acts, largely ignored by the U.S. collective memory, have deeply contributed to Pyongyang's contempt for the U.S. and especially its ongoing military presence on the Korean peninsula. Quote, most Americans are completely unaware that we destroyed more cities in North Korea than we did in Japan or Germany during World War II. Every North Korean knows about this. It's drilled into their minds. We never hear about it. End quote. Historian and author Bruce Cummings told Newsweek by email on Monday. That's a screenshot from Newsweek from May 4th of 2017 if you'd like to go to source. While Newsweek in this article is telling the truth, the more generally the U.S. media has failed to inform Americans regarding the extensive war crimes committed against the Korean people by successive U.S. administrations. Collective memory of the people of North Korea. It is not in America's collective memory as pointed out by Newsweek, but it is certainly in the collective memory of the people of the DPRK. There is not a single family in North Korea which has not lost a loved one during the 37 months of extensive U.S. carpet bombing in 1950 to 1953. Put yourself in their shoes. Stephen Gowans from The Washington Considers Military Action Against North Korea to Force Regime Change article. He says, in addition to direct military action from 1950 to 1953 against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the U.S. aggression has included multiple threats of nuclear annihilation and the development of tactical nuclear weapons into South Korea until 1991. Redeployment is now under consideration in Washington. Most U.S. nuclear threats against Pyongyang were made before North Korea embarked on its own nuclear weapons program, and constitute one of the principal reasons it did so. The countries being declared an original member of the Bush administration's axis of evil, along with Iraq and Iran, provided an additional impetus. North Korea has additionally been menaced by annual U.S.-directed war games involving hundreds of thousands of troops carried out along North Korea's borders. While U.S. officials describe the twice-yearly assembling of the significant military forces within striking range of the DPRK as routine and defensive, it is never clear to the North Korean military whether the U.S.-directed maneuvers are defensive exercises or preparations for an invasion. Number 3, the International Action Center. U.S. troops have occupied South Korea since 1945 and are still there. There are 38 U.S. military installations in South Korea, plus one militarized golf course. The golf course is the station for the first terminal high-altitude area defense battery in South Korea, a U.S. radar system opposed by the Korean people in the north and south, as well as China. Every year, the U.S. carries out a massive war exercise in and around the Korean Peninsula. This year's Operation Key Resolve, or Foal Eagle, which began in March and continued until April 24th, has involved hundreds of thousands of troops from the U.S. and South Korea. The South Korean news agency, Yonhap, reported on March 13th. The U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6 will join the annual Foal Eagle and Key Resolve exercises between the two allies in the first time, along with the Army's Rangers, Delta Force, and Green Berets. Yonhap quoted an unnamed military official as saying, quote, "A bigger number of and more diverse U.S. Special Operation Forces will take part in this year's Foal Eagle and Key Resolve exercises to practice missions to infiltrate into the North, remove the North's war command, and demolition of its key military facilities." The joint report issued on our return was titled, "The Grand Deception Revealed." That title was chosen because we discovered that the negative Western propaganda myth about North Korea is a grand deception designed to blind the peoples of the world to the accomplishments of the North Korean people in the North, who have successfully created their own circumstances, their own independent socio-economic system based on socialist principles, free of the domination of the Western powers. As one of our first dinners in Pyongyang and our host, Ri Myung-kook, a lawyer, stated on behalf of the government and in passionate terms that the DPRK's nuclear deterrent force was necessary in light of U.S. world actions and threats against the DPRK. He stated that this was repeated to me in a high-level meeting with DPRK government officials later on in the trip, that if the Americans would sign a peace treaty and non-aggression agreement with the DPRK, it would delegitimize the American occupation and lead to reunification. Consequently, there would be no need for nuclear weapons. He stated sincerely that it's important that lawyers are gathering to talk about this as lawyers regulate the social interactions within society and within the world, and added just as sincerely that the path to peace requires an open heart. It appeared to us, and is apparent now, in absolute contradiction to the claims of the Western media, that the people of DPRK want peace more than anything else so they can get on with their lives and endeavors without the constant threat of nuclear annihilation by the United States. But annihilation is what they in fact face, and whose fault is that? Not theirs. We were shown American documents captured in the Korean War that were compelling evidence that the U.S. planned an attack on North Korea in 1950. The attack was carried out using American and South Korean forces with the assistance of Japanese Army officers who invaded and occupied Korea decades before. The North Korean defense and counterattack was then claimed by the U.S. to be aggression, which the United States manipulated in the media to get the UN to support a police operation, the euphemism they choose to use to carry on what was in fact their war of aggression against North Korea. 3 years of war and 3.5 million Korean deaths followed, and the U.S. has threatened them with imminent war and annihilation ever since. I had an interesting encounter with the Korean man I met when I was exiting the flight from DPRK on August 31st. Then we had just exchanged some brief words. Later in Beijing, we met by chance and spoke about North Korea. As it happened, he had visited 28 years prior, and as it further happens, he was born in the South and lived 20 years of his life there before America. He speaks the language and on this recent trip interacted with North Koreans one-on-one. In sum, he was very impressed with the changes since he'd been there nearly 3 decades ago. And while he was born in the South and lives in America, he does not support the U.S. rhetoric around the North. Hopefully, we'll have a proper interview or talk when both back at the respective homes we go. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this article about North Korea and its people and its successes, and some of the positive things we can look at about the country and the people if we don't back and believe all of the rhetoric from the media and the government. Thank you for coming to Plain Mundane Show. I'm Alex Aquarius. Please hit like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I'm out.